We've discussed the structural racism that is in the fabric of America, and because of that, African Americans, as we all agree, we've been traumatized, and we continue to be traumatized. Yet we have not received proper counseling, and so we walk around wounded. I was in a class, an advocacy class, where the teacher was talking about African Americans, men who are walking kind of slumped over, and what they told the instructor was that they almost are unconsciously shrinking themselves so they don't appear intimidating to the white world. This is a kind of trauma that even young African American men are experiencing today. Can the two of you talk about how we heal from past and current racism and how it has traumatized us as a people? And then connected with that, do you believe in some form of reparations because of slavery?
The trauma of the institution of chattel slavery lingers within every fabric of African American culture, I believe. I think you see it with the ways in which we talk about parenting, and I think you see it in our relationships with each other and our intimate relationships with our partners. Looking at it from a theological perspective, from a perspective of Christianity, I believe fundamentally what we have to be able to do is to cultivate a new way of seeing ourselves as being created in the image of God and worthy of love, deep love. And this love is, I would say, should move us more towards solidarity. Not just solidarity, even with our families, but really solidarity from kind of an African diasporic perspective, right? And so this kind of love allows us to both name the trauma that we have experienced, right? Where we speak it out, you know what I'm saying? It's that kind of lament process that we see just from the prophets, right? You actually just name it. And in order to give voice to that woundedness that lingers within us. Naming it is a crucial part to allowing it to be able to heal. Say, this is the legacy that we carry. And then work towards actually compassionately tending to those things that comes up. I think now some of that can be done in a religious community, but I'll be honest, sometimes some of those things need to be done through actual counseling and therapy for certain people, depending on their context and where they come from. Which again is kind of an interesting thing within the African American community. But I think it begins with being able to see ourselves as we are, as worthy of being loved, without having to perform a certain kind of whiteness, right? To perform humanness in the ways in which the dominant culture expects us to. And once we can step away from doing that, and actually affirm our own identity and our concrete realities, I think that's the beginnings. But again, this is difficult work, and it begins by naming it and actually acknowledging the ways in which race continues to shape us and racism continues to shape us.
Mm-hmm. You want to talk about reparations before Seth?
I think that I fundamentally believe in reparations, in the idea that people of color have been exploited, that this country is built on exploited labor, and that it's fundamentally just to compensate for that exploitation. I think it's we have a history of this in other countries. For instance, Jews got reparations for the Holocaust and things of that nature. This isn't a foreign concept, and we continue to be marginalized with regards to access to certain kind of social and political goods that we're supposed to get from the government, right? And so that continued denial, I think, of rights is why I believe reparations not only are, from a perspective of a citizen, justified, but theologically, it is a part of what it means to be about doing justice, right? The love praxis of Jesus, right, is actually giving people what they are due, in this sense. And I think it is a loving action that actually can begin moving us towards healing, right? Giving people the opportunity to flourish. And to be able to allow themselves to make some kind of progress socially and within their own communities because by giving them access to a way of being in the world they haven't yet quite had. But reparations makes us confront the past, right? It charges us with confronting the past of what we are being compensated for. And so both for people of color, black people specifically, and white people, again, we go back to this trauma. And it brings it up. And so, again, this is where I believe compassion, I think it's just fundamentally key to how we begin to address that trauma.
I think for me as a white person, it's a little bit different. How would I address the trauma that African Americans experience? And so I don't have the experiential knowledge of that trauma because I'm white. And so that changes the dynamic in those spaces. And so I think there needs to be spaces for people of color to heal themselves that are absent people like me, they're absent white people. And then there need to be other spaces that are interracial. Because one of the most powerful things for me has been attending church in Compton, and that I was invited to play saxophone with a choir, and I was welcomed into that environment. And there was one Sunday that they were singing Hush. Hush, hush, yeah, right. So I couldn't play on that song. I was invited to play on the song, but I couldn't because what was taking place was something that connected deep roots. And I had to witness it. I couldn't be a part of it. I had to witness what was going on and realize that this is a healing space. And so I needed to just be present for that.
Amen. Want to talk about reparations a little bit?
I fundamentally believe in reparations. I think when you're talking about taking compassionate actions, it's a restorative justice action at the structural level. And so I think that sort of action is absolutely needed to make amends for racism, for what has been the intergenerational trauma that's been perpetuated through these racist social structures. That needs to be addressed, and I think reparations needs to be a fundamental part of that.